in the last few minutes. Uh, Made it in time. Tonight we're going to turn the tarp around. You get to see the Cody Brown side, the sort of a brownish green or baby poop brown, if you want to call it that side, instead of the other side. Whew, it's been a whirlwind last few minutes. I cooked some for the wife because tonight's her, she works late, so she's coming in. Hello, James. And so it was start at 5, cooking, have it ready at 6, walk the cat, take care of this, put that, swap the load of laundry, finish supper. She comes in, goes change, have it plated, ready to eat, wash the dishes, help the cat get the eye drops. He got glaucoma, got the eye drops. Then it's take out the garbage, run to the car, get this, run that over there, come back in, set up the tarp and everything, all in 40 minutes. So yeah, now I'll kick back and rest. Hello, Jonathan. How you doing, sir? Carlos, good evening. Okay. I was wondering about that, Jonathan. A couple people had asked me, said your account kind of went dark, so I guess somebody got hacked. I'll pass it on to let everybody know. Bob, good evening to Southwest Ohio. How's the weather there? It is lovely down here right now. We've got the days have been in the 70s and the night have been in the 50s. Woo! For May, it is awesome, baby. It feels like fall. We're just having a great time. Things go well. If it goes well, I'll get to go camp Saturday night. I get to sneak off to the woods and get to go camping. It's still going to be cool, so fingers crossed. Joe, good evening. Scott Smith, as it stands now, Bear wants to go up for the day to Blade show. And so I will go up there for the day and walk around with him and look around. Times and stuff, I can't tell you. It's just whenever we get together and get out of here and get up there during that Saturday. But I plan on going up there. So just look for the hat if you're going to be up there. Okay, Jonathan, looking forward to it. Benson, good evening. Should be, I'll call it that. Good evening to Kansas City. Washburn, good evening. Brad, I was curious about knife maintenance for old knives. Usually, treat them like you would any other carbon steel. Now, since it's a cooking knife or something's going to handle food, you're probably going to want to stick something like olive oil. If this knife is going to be utilized and put in a block or something, treat it like any other kitchen knife. Just make sure it stays oiled. Some sort of cooking oil works fine. If it's a field knife that's going to be used for woodcraft, bushcraft, stuff like that, then you can put other kinds of oils on it. But don't put WD-40 onto a knife that may end up in the kitchen being cut without a real good cleaning, or you might contaminate food. If it's wood handle, just standard treatment. Any kind of oil, olive oil or whatever rubbed in the handles is good. And there's lots of furniture treatments for handles. If it's bone or something like that, or horn, and it's really, really old, look at a veterinary supply, and they've got this stuff for putting on hooves of horses. That's what you want. It'll keep it from cracking and checking. Bob, cool. Glad it's clear up there. James, I have not looked at the conversion cylinder for my Rogers and Spencer. I am still on the fence thinking about getting one to drop into my 58 Remington Sheriff in 45 Colt. I've already got 45 Colt dies and stuff and have another gun in 45 Colt, but it's a long barrel and that short barrel will be just handy. But I haven't even thought about doing it for that Rogers and Spencer yet. Good evening, Justin. Sanford, good evening. Antonio, I am sorry. Chad, hello to the Ozark Mountains. Carlos, Puerto Rico, I expect it. Y'all live in the tropics, man. Y'all have the beautiful time year round. It's beautiful. I have had a good friend that Ryan, he was from Puerto Rico, and him and his whole family, and they would show me pictures and stuff, and they had grandma and stuff up in New York, where a lot of Puerto Ricans end up. And so they would spend time down at the islands, and then they'd go back to grandma in New York, and they'd come back down here. So I got to see a lot of family photos and stuff. Love to celebrate. Good food, too. You will not go hungry around people from Puerto Rico. You will insult them if you don't eat. So, Joseph, good evening to Columbus. David, I'm glad you like that. That figure 9 worked well for Dan because he could reach up over his head and hook it and loop it by feel and not have to see his hands. And I had that ridgeline made up with those different choices to show him. And so I still had it on there. But yeah, for quick, up, down, yeah, really easy. Your thoughts on the yo-yo for catfish? If it's legal where you're at, they're very, very effective. Run a line of them like you're going to run a trot line. 8 or 9 of them down a bank. Bait them up. Hook them to a good flexible limb. Don't tie them to the tree because that's going to put all the strain onto the line and the reel. Find you something about 2-inch diameter that will lean. You can take it by hand, put your body weight on it and lean it and hook it to that way. That way when the fish pulls the tree, will act like a shock absorber. Make sure they can't break the line. Cats pull hard, but they do tire. And so they'll put up one heck of a pull for 10, 15 minutes total, and then they're wore out. And so then he will just circle around in a circle waiting for you. But works really good that way. Nathan, hello from Wisconsin. What kind of music you enjoy, and do you play any instruments? I play air guitar really, really good. Other than that, no. I don't. I listen to all kinds of music. I will drive you nuts listening to me because I will listen to gospel. I will listen to country. I will listen to rock and roll, heavy metal, foreign bands you've never heard of, like Ladysmith Black Mambazo, best harmony in the world. Not Poland, off the edge of Spain. Portuguese heavy metal band. I listen to, Mongolian heavy metal. I listen to everything and will drive people nuts sitting there in the car listening to my music because it shifts all kinds of genres. If I like it, I'm going to listen to it. If I don't, I could care less. So, but sorry to give you a kind of an answer like that. That's the truth. I listen to just about everything. Hello to Bloodstone in Virginia. How you doing? Good evening to WWG1 WGA Cool. Mr. Mike Simmons, get up with me about going to Pathfinder. I want to talk to you about it. Okay, let's see. What else? Edgar, hello there. Crossover Paranormal Society. Awesome. Hello. Hobo, hello to Yuma, Arizona. Randy, how old are you, Blackie? I'm in my 60s. I know that's hard to believe with this subtle frosting. Yeah, I'm in my 60s now. Woo, Jonathan. June 6th, schedule that. Jonathan, they do the nerve induction series. That's what they called. They did that on me one time. They tied me to a table and put 300 needles in my back and took jumper cables and saw how you jumped. Nerve induction series. It was a real interesting afternoon. I'll put it that way. I told the lady, you better tie my hands. Why? Because think you're a great person right now, but I'm here to tell you that many needles in me, I'm liable to start throwing punches. I can't help it. Just tie my hands. And I was serious. After them jumper cables going up and down that line 2 or 3 times, I had had enough of this. Oh, Edgar, I hear you. I've got a friend. He's listened to the same albums, the same 5 or 10 albums over and over again since the 1980s. He won't listen to anything else. And the bear's in the house. Good evening, sir. Hobo, are there any rendezvous type events in the Southwest? I think there is. I believe there's something in Arizona, but I don't know, to be honest. Whenever I was doing all my reenacting, rendezvousing and stuff, it was the Southeast, Northeastern, Old Northwest. I didn't do anything that way. So I'm just not for me. I know about Colorado and stuff had it, but I believe they did something in Arizona as well. David, what is your favorite camping stone? The stove, Trangia. One of them little like Trangia alcohols. Now, if we're talking about a camp setting where I'm going to be, say, me and my wife for a week, it'll be a Coleman. Because I can keep that. I can do anything you can do at a house. I can do on a Coleman stove. But if it's just for me and a couple of days or something, it's going to be a small Trangia stove. Because with it, I can heat, I can boil, I can do whatever I need because I scale my cooking and my needs to short duration. I'm a fast cook. I want to cook something in 10 to 15 minutes and be done. You know, my whole time of stopping, eating, cleaning up, 30 minutes. I don't want to spend 3 hours making a meal. If we're going to be doing elaborate stuff like that, then we're going to have the Coleman stove and a fire going to work Dutch ovens. That's just the way I work. Peter, Blackie, you have any tips on making bushcraft furniture that doesn't take long to make? Tools, stools, what can you bring to make it easier? In a couple of my videos, I talked about a thing called a construction knot. All it is a loop with a pair of rabbit ears on this end. So you just take however long you think you're going to need, okay, add 6 inches or so, and you're going to come in, say 6, 8 inches, you're going to tie a knot, both cords together. So you got a loop with a pair of V up here. Now I stick a stick into it, and I twist the loop. I stick another stick in it, I twist the loop. Continue till I get to the end. Then I put a short stick in it, and I twist it, and that accordions it up tight. I fold that stick over the top and take them 2 rabbit ears to tie it. With that, I can create a tabletop, 2 on each end. Put one end of the tree and the other end on a freestanding tripod. I can make a bench. I can make a raised bed. Make it wider and longer. Turn it up flat. It's a wall on the cabin. Put it up on top. It's a roof. It's the same technique over and over again, just how big you want. I ain't got to spend a lot of time lashing, etc. I form the loop, cut the sticks, put in it, and just start twisting. When I get done, I can take it all the way apart and reclaim my cordage. It's called a construction knot. And I have covered in my videos in the last 2 years. So you probably have to dig back there a little bit. But there's one of me sitting there holding up something that's a bunch of sticks lashed together. I did that first time, and the second time I did it was with bear on a tailgate of a truck. So look for that, and that will make it a lot quicker and easier to put together camp furniture quickly. Tim O'Neill, hello there. CJ, good evening. Krav Maga, hello to Arkansas. Oh yeah, Hobo, northern Arizona. Yeah, there's a lot of pretty mountains in Arizona. A lot of desert, but a lot of pretty mountains too. Zach Bond, how do you make fire from ice? What they do is they take ice and get it thin and use it to focus the sun's rays like you do a burning lens. I'm here to tell you, it has to be in very, very dry condition for you to get it to work. It can work, but it's got to be hard, crystal clear ice that you can get down thin enough to focus the sun's rays, and you got to have a bone dry tinder that'll catch it. But I have seen it demonstrated. I haven't, because I'm not in that kind of cold country, but I have seen it done on tape by people that really know how to do it. You could make fire from ice. It's a trick, but it works. Good evening, Diane. How you doing? William Cruz. Blackie, how do you carry your fuel for the Trangia, and how much do you bring? I have a bottle that's a little bit bigger than this. that's got a screw top that's designed for carrying fuel. If you look at Campmore, Campcraft, things like that, places that sell backpacking supplies, you'll find it. And if you go look online, Trangia makes one that's got a push button to it. But the one I got just simply got a screw cap and there's two holes in it. So when you unscrew it so far up, there's an air hole through. So I can turn the can sideways and it'll be a very small stream pouring out and air going in the top and oil, fuel coming out, so I can very precisely pour. And then when I'm done, I just screw it down tight. That's how I carry fuel. Usually one of them bottles, which is about like a soda bottle, like a 24 ounce, like a 1 liter or something, is more than enough for a 3-day camp out for me. Terry, have you been to the CMP stores in your state? They're very, very nice. I have not been to the one here in about 15 years, but they're normally very good people to work with you. And so if you get your paperwork and stuff in, find out what the qualifications are, or you want to go up there and get you a 1911 or a M1 Grand or something, you fit the qualification, you can. At one time, I don't know, okay, at one time, carrying a concealed pistol permit granted you access to that. Other things, you have to be a member of a shooting club. But I have heard, although I don't know, double check, but I have heard that if you had a concealed weapons permit, that would qualify you to go to CMP and pick up something. So good luck to you. Claymore, good morning. AJ, yes, this is a tarp. This is one of them military tarps that's camouflage on one side. And usually I have the camouflage side up. At night I say, what the heck, I'll flip it around. Why did I put this up? Because behind me, this is my study. It's got all my camping gear and everything. And what you're going to see behind me is stacked up boxes of totes saying paracord, backpacks, knives, cook sets. Everybody will be sitting there going, Blackie, in the upper right corner, what is that? So it's just to keep everybody focused. Otherwise, I'll be where, because I've talked to friends before and they always want to move the camera around. I said, what is that? What is that? Because I got a lot of stuff in this room. Dances with empty. I'm doing well, thank you. Diane, how do you carry eggs when you're hiking? Okay, an old trick we used to do if you drank coffee is we would put the eggs in the coffee can with the coffee. So you put down a layer of coffee, put the eggs, pack the coffee around it, put more eggs, pack the coffee around it. And if you got it right, you knew that this much you dug down, that was the amount of coffee you're going to use for the 3 eggs you're going to have for breakfast. And so that was like 3 days worth of eggs and coffee in that can. But that's the way I like to carry them, is packed in something like that I'm carrying anyway, oatmeal or something like that. Now today you can also put them into a Ziploc bag and pad them with other stuff like that and keep them secure. I don't particularly like the carrier thing. That looks cool and it's great in a cooler, but as far as backpacking, I prefer to put it in something. There was a while there I carried a PVC pipe that had a cap on the end, and I would just slide the egg in top to bottom and put tissue paper between it to pad it, because it's very strong up and down. It's not very strong side to side. So that kept it vertical, and my pack, so any shock was in the straight up and down. Very hard to crack it that way. Sage, what I would recommend is a stroller. One of them big wheel strollers like you can find. Look around your Goodwills and something and find a trashed stroller that's got the big wheels on it, like the 3 wheels are running strollers. I've got several old Silver Wolves. That's how they carry their stuff. Either they pull it backwards, they just put 2 bars going out where they can grab it like a rickshaw and walk, or they push it forward on fairly flat ground. And it carries the weight. And if you're trying to put quite a bit of weight on it, that or a bicycle, the Viet Cong proved you can carry 500 pounds on a bicycle, and just push it. Robert Owens, good evening. Crossover, what's your favorite go-to knife to take camping? It's going to be my Blackbird by WC knives, William Collins knives. Um, I carried all kinds of knives before that, but that knife is really an extension of me. That's the knife that I kind of, talking to William, he threw out that design, and we kind of refined it, and that became the Blackbird. And it's just a natural extension of me. And if I was going to have one knife for the rest of my life, it would be that knife. Now, if we're talking about, do you want a chopping tool, it's going to be a kukri. But if it had to be just one knife, period, it would be that knife. That's just it. It fits me so well. Hello to Puerto Rico again, and to Tidewater, Virginia. Steve, yeah, parboiling, pre-hard boiled eggs. If you just want to carry them to eat, that's the way to go. You're not wanting to crack an egg. And here's another little trick. You can take raw eggs and put them in some sort of mesh or some sort of wire basket and put them into boiling water for 5 seconds. Get a good hard rolling boil and put like 5 or 6 eggs and just submerge them 5 seconds and then pull them out and let them cool. What happens is that heat transfer causes the inner membrane to grow just a little bit thicker. It doesn't really cook it, but it kind of seals it. And that's how they used to, you remember, if you look in a lot of the old black and white movies and stuff from the 20s and 30s, and you'd see a table, and there'd be this wire basket with eggs in it. People didn't refrigerate eggs. You don't really need to. In fact, there's advantages not to. But what they do is they take their eggs and rinse them off, and then they would dump that whole thing full of eggs into boiling water for like a 6-7 count, 5 seconds. Pull them out and let them cool, and those eggs were good for like 2 weeks. And you always knew if you had a bad egg. You would always take an egg and you would crack it in a bowl. You wouldn't crack it over the mixing bowl full of the cake batter. You'd crack it over a separate bowl. If it was bad, you knew instantly. And you threw that away, got another bowl, and cracked another egg. So turned bad egg. It smelled horrible. It turned bad because there's anything wrong, any botulism or whatever, there's some sort of crack in the shell you didn't see. And that egg had turned bad, leaving it out of refrigeration, you would see it like that. We don't do that. We refrigerate eggs. That egg can go bad and have botulism, and we throw it right in our food because it don't look anything different because it's been in refrigeration. And so really, in certain ways, we've gone backwards. Now there's more people getting sick from eggs than there was before. Oh, yeah, 1873 rifles. Yes. Winchester 73, love it. K-Town, they can get expensive. They have gone up and down. And but now I've got friends here who's selling a dozen eggs locally for $3. So another reason to be kind of independent and have your own little garden and your own chicken here or there. Good evening, Mr. John Kennedy. How you doing? Randy, yeah, that plastic thing does not do worth a flip in a cooler. It will just bouncing up and down on ATV. You're just going to break them all. You do better to find some other way to pad them and put them vertically. So, Steve, like the Cold Steel Recon Scout or the Trailmaster, those are nice big knives. They do a really good job for the big knife. Carry a small knife as a backup with it because 9 times out of 10, that big knife can do the job, just like my kukri. But there's certain small details that it can't. Like when you got to dig a fish hook out of you, having that small razor sharp pocket knife makes a difference. That's the reason old Nesmont carried 3. He carried that pocket knife, he carried a belt knife, and then he carried that 2-sided hatchet. Each one did multiple jobs and overlapped, and he was right. And I found in my experience, keep a small razor sharp small blade, the larger big blade on a pocket knife for general use, and then carry a belt knife for the wood stuff, etc. Just works out better. But 112, hello to Northwest Georgia. Crab Mag, have you filled this run of haversacks yet? Yes, I have filled this run. But if you want to get on to the next one, if you'll contact me at down in dirty woods with an S craft at gmail.com and say, put me on the next run, I'll add you to the run that'll probably begin at the end of summer, first of fall. And I'll contact you. Usually whoever's on the list, I'll give them a week's head start before I announce to everybody else. So if you miss out on this run, you're in the front of the line for the next run. That's as fair as I can be. And that gives everybody a chance to save up, know what it's going to be, and it's going to be coming in a couple of months. And then when it hits, they're good. And it seems to work out pretty well. The answer was empty. Do you know of anybody in the United States making a hand reloading tool for modern pistol cartridges like the old Ideal one you'd use or see back in 1873? I do not. I know that for quite a while you could still get the Lyman 310. That's the modern version of that tool. I say modern in the 1900s. The one back in 73s and all, they actually had the bullet mold on the front of it. Those are just pure antiques. I don't see why they couldn't be custom made. I really don't. I don't see how they couldn't be modern investment cast and make them at a relatively cheap price, just like the originals did, where you had a bullet mold up front and the back down here in the tongs was your loading tool. And for carrying in the field in a modern caliber, should work. But the 310 tool is the Lyman. I know they made them in 44, 45, 45 AC, 44 Magnum, 44 Special, 45 Colt, 38, 357, 45 ACP, if I didn't say that. Maybe 9mm, I'm not sure. That was the Lyman 310 tool, but I do not know of anybody in modern time making it. Now, Lee makes a hand press. It's about this tall. You screw the dies in. I've got one of those, and I've carried those to the field before for working up loads there at the range. But as far as the old tong type tools, to my knowledge, no. Number one, Big Bear. Well, hello. Thank you. If you're talking about Claymore, are you talking about the them shipping the reloading presses to you, or my haversacks? Good evening, Jonathan Gable. Edgar, is a 22 rifle and a 44 Magnum or 10mm pistol a smart combination? Yes, that would work very well. The 22 will handle all the little small game quietly. The 44 with hand loading, I can go all the way from small game up to the biggest game on North America just by hand loading it. The 10mm pistol, I wouldn't recommend that much, but yet it is fabulously powerful. But it being an automatic, it's going to require X amount of power. And whenever times get tough, your choices of powders are going to get hard to find. Whereas that 44, that case, you can do everything from black powder up in it. Whereas that 10, it's too finicky. You'll get where don't cycle. It quickly turns into a single shot. A pop, chick, pop, And where the Magnum would have the advantage of longevity of being able to produce and utilize a little bit better. Wouldn't be a bad choice as long as you get ammo and reloading components. Well, Bradley, good evening. Sir Malcolm, awesome. You know, that's one thing Dan Lutz said one of the best baits he used was Denny Moore beef stew. All the animals are anywhere near civilization are used to garbage, and they smell it and they are attracted to it. So he'd use Denny Moore beef stew, and he said I'd take the can lid and put it on a piece of wire like a twirly gig and hang it near the trap for curiosity, so he'd sit there and shine and spin, put it on a little fishing swivel. You get a lot of things come up trying to check out what is that. Coons, possums, coyotes are always attracted to anything odd, and they'll come over to sniff it out and see what it is and get close to the trap, and then they may be caught by the scent and brought in. But somewhere in my stuff, I've got 6 hours of that trapping class that Dan put on. 6 hours of video that we taped him. And I've talked to the family about possibly us editing it into something to put out. But there's a lot of stuff he brought up that I never thought of in trapping. David Wright, thank you. Carlos, where is your black bird? The knife itself hanging on the wall right over there. Oh, my haversack. No, I will ship overseas. You just have to, Claymore, you just have to pay whatever it is to ship. And what it is I tell people, you put your money in the basic price, $85, and you lock it in. And then we find out what it's going to be. I'll give you what the total is. If it's going to be too much, I'll gladly refund you money. But to things like I've shipped to New Zealand, Australia, Poland, Russia, Japan, Buenos Aires, Diego Garcia, India, Sweden, Germany, England. England's real expensive. Wow. Canada, Greece. I mean, I've shipped everywhere. It's just that's it. We'll find out, then I'll take a haversack and stuff. I'll go with your address and tell them how much to ship this to there at the cheapest rate. And then I contact you and say, okay, it's going to be this much more. And if you say, yes, I want it, then we do it. If it's not, then I refund you money. But I've had people all over the world want it. Gray Wolf, good evening. Dark Meta, hello. Oh, no, Tiny Titan. Oh, we're just talking about reloading gear and stuff like that. Edgar, yes, the 10 millimeter, and that's why the 10 millimeter was created. It was an argument between the 45 and the 9 millimeter guys back in the 70s on the ISPC shooting because 9 millimeter was considered a minor caliber. Well, I know those guys hated it too. And you had to generate X amount of foot-pounds of pressure, where the 45, the 357, the bigger calibers were not, and so you weren't penalized as bad. And guys were loading up 9 millimeters to the point they were busting slides. And so Jeff Cooper and them brought out the 10 millimeter, which was the 40 caliber. It was the weight of the 45 ACP target load, 180 grains, moving at the speed of the 9 millimeter, which would get it up in 357 ballistics. And there was another caliber that has been brought out in a couple of different things since the 70s called a 3845. And all it was a 45 ACP neck down and a 357 bullet put onto it. Then they came out with 357 SIG, same basic idea of using a 40 cal. And so there's nothing really new under the sun. They just keep reinventing these things. But it's very powerful. It does great. It's a lot better today than it was when the 10 millimeter first came out. The bullets, it was not a common size bullet, 40 caliber. The only thing that was 40 caliber you could still find was 3840 black powder, which is a cartridge kind of like 4440, 45 Colt, 3840, which is actually a 40 caliber 40 grains of powder, but they didn't want to call it a 40-40, so they called it a 38-40. And ballistic, I remember Ruger made a twin cylinder Black Hawk that was in 10 millimeter 40 and 38-40, 2 cylinders. So you shot the 10 millimeter and the 40 in the same cylinder, and then you could drop in the 38-40 and shoot the other one in a single action. And but the bullets were basically like tuna cans. They were as tall as they were wide, and they porpoised, and they were not accurate. Now, 25 years later, of the 40 cal, which is just a cooled down 10 millimeter, you get good bullets that are stable. And now you really can have the 10 millimeter because you got the bullet technology. But 25 years ago, we didn't have it. The bullets would just porpoise, and you had hula hoop size groups at 20 yards because the bullets just went everywhere. 0 to 10 yards was great. 25 yards, they were all over the place. And that's the reason the 40 cal came about. It was originally called 10 millimeter FBI load, where they'd slowed it down to that bullet was stable. Same weight, same size, just slowed it down to where it didn't do that porpoising when it came out. And today we've got something really nice, but it took time. I wouldn't mind having a 10, trying it out today. I shot one back in the day, was not impressed, but I know with all the development they've done today, they probably got a real rock solid gun by this point. Oh yeah, Justin, 7.6225 Tokarev, which don't confuse it with 7.6225 Mauser, 7.6225 Czech, 7.6225 30 caliber. Oh, there's another name for it. 30 caliber Bergman. You know, that the same basic thing, but what's the power level? The Czech version was 307 ballistics. And if you drop one of them into a Tokarev, it'd crack the slide. On the other hand, the CZ52 handled it quite easily. I had a CZ52 for a while, and man, that thing was armor penetrating. The range that I was part of catered to a lot of law enforcement. And Second Chance came out with their new ballistic vest for cops, for SWAT teams, and put it up on a mannequin on the range and was encouraging all these guys to shoot it. And they were shooting it with their 9s, their 40s, their 10 millimeters, 45s, 357, 44 Magnum. No penetration whatsoever. And they even took a Ziploc bag and filled it full of water and put it underneath on the inside to show there wasn't even enough pressure to bust the bag. Yeah, it'd be like you got hit in the chest with a punch or a kick, but it wouldn't break ribs, is what they were trying to say. And I had one of them CZ52s, and he wanted me to shoot it. I said, "You don't want me to shoot it. You really don't." And he said, "Go ahead, shoot it." I shot it, and it went through both sides and hit the back wall. It went through and hit the back barrier. Didn't even slow down. And he goes, "Oh my God, you're shooting armor-piercing ammo." It's Czech machine gun ammo, 7.6225. That was 70 rounds for $12, shooting it out of an $89 surplus handgun. Yeah. In fact, the Soviets, they had to have special ceramic plates just for those 7.6225s because it would penetrate their ballistic armor unless they had a ceramic plate behind it. True. There are how many calibers? The designers and manufacturers, there is an argument that can be made that we have not developed anything better than the 30-06 since 1910. Oh, but yes, I agree. But in ability, etc., 30-06. Well, it's not as cool and sexy as a insert your favorite cartridge right now. And you're right. It's because you're Remington and you're making the 30-06. And then Winchester comes out with a 6 millimeter whatever. And everybody goes, ooh, and jumps over and starts buying them. Well, now Remington's got to come out with a 6 millimeter whatever that kind of duplicates or does whatever it is. And they just, is it a sufficient gun, enough gun, big enough diameter, moving fast enough, and doesn't expand? Well, it'll take it. And this is from a hypocrite that I have had hundreds of guns in my life. I was a gunsmith for a while. I built custom guns for a while, especially for long range target shooting out to 1,000 yards. So I played with all the fancy and all those weird wildcats and etc. And does it do anything better? Maybe. Yeah, and this it does better. Shoots a little flatter, goes a little harder, does, But it don't mean that this old 30-06 can't do it anymore. You know, that's one of the things with the cap and ball revolvers. I'm all time hearing, oh, wait, ballistically, they're no more dangerous than a 25 ACP. Really? Having shot game with cap and ball revolvers up to 1,000+ pound cattle, whereas what I had, and we had to put this animal down now. I'm here to tell you, don't dismiss a cap and ball revolver, especially at close range. It's amazing how effective that thing can be. But ballistically, it's da 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 da. Ballistics is an idea. It's a method of comparison, but it is not exact, and it is not correct in many ways, especially when you get out on the fringes. And one of our favorite things to point out years ago was we would put these ballistics up there, and we would tell you, which gun do you want to shoot? And one had this ridiculous amount of velocity and a ridiculous, foot-pounds of energy. And you're going to shoot a bear with it. And that was a 22 3000, which was kind of like a 300 Winchester mag nicked down to a little bitty 40 grain 22 bullet. Like something that long with an itty bitty 22 long rifle bullet on it. Scalded out of that barrel like 3,900 feet per second. It was for shooting prairie dogs and stuff at 400 yards. The other one over there had a maximum velocity of 1,700 feet per second. It looked anemic. That was a 4570 government. This one has dropped buffalo at 700-800 yards. This one shoots prairie dogs at a quarter mile, But ballistically, man, that 2.2, it looks real impressive. But don't shoot a bear with one, you're going to tick him off. One of my favorite rifle magazine years ago, the guy that was the chief editor, lives in Alaska, and he does guide services up there. And he's got a gun that's kind of famous up there in Alaska called Old Ugly. And it's a Remington 700 in 416 Remington. You probably never heard of it. 416 is one of the most violently kicking cartridges there is. I mean, it is just violent when it goes off. And it was designed for shooting things like wildebeest and zebra and things like that in Africa. But he uses it to shoot elk and stuff. But it is so violent, it destroys scopes, literally. And he put out a thing in Rifle Magazine, might have been Hand Loader, he wrote for both of them, and said anybody that would like to send him a scope, he would put the scope onto Old Ugly and shoot. And if it held a 0 at 100 yards for 50 rounds, they could use his name free for advertising. Well, he got scopes from all over the major names of the world. I mean, Leopold, Zeiss, all of them. One was a $2,800 Zeiss that was set up for a sniping rifle. 4 rounds, the lens fell out of the front of it. 4 rounds. He went through all the scopes, and every scope failed before they got 50 rounds. Every one of them failed. But there was one scope he had not tried, because when he was going through pulling out. Um, there was this scope company that he had never heard of before, and he went and looked them up, and they made BB guns and air rifle scopes. And he just laughed and threw it back in the box. I mean, obviously, he was trying to get some publicity. Forget it. And so after he had destroyed all the scopes, he contacted all the manufacturers and told them, how their scope had done before it's going to come out in print. And he called them up and said, look, I know you were trying to get some publicity, but, this is a real gun. And the guy on the other end said, oh, wait a minute. We were serious. Put it on your gun. It'll hold up. He went, sir, this ain't a BB gun. This is a 416. He said, if you'll go back and look at Leopold, Zeiss, all those names, and you're reading the fine print, it tells you if you put it on an air gun of any kind, you void the warranty. That's because a rifle shoots and there's a shock wave going end to end. But an air rifle goes won't is a piston does something inside. And that won't back just destroys the scope. They can't take that reverse shot. He says, it'll hold up on yours. So he went, proved him wrong, bolted it up on top of Old Ugly, and 100 rounds later, that gun was still holding a 0 at 100 yards. An air rifle scope. And 5 years later, he still was using that scope. A BB gun scope? But it was holding a group, but it could handle it. And at $2,800, Zeiss got 4 shots and the lens fell out of it. A lot of the stuff they're selling us is a lot of hype too. So, Aaron, yeah, a 1 ounce slug in a 12 does a really good job. William, good night. Gray Wolf, yes, they are. Air rifles are hell on scopes because that reverse shock wave. I wouldn't have known it until I read that. And I went, you got to be kidding me. A Center Point, that's the name of it, Center Point. Walmart picked it up and went to selling those scopes. And they were 3x9s with a lit reticle. You could turn it on, have it red or green to fit whatever your eyes. And we were selling for $89. And I was selling the guns for Walmart back then, and I recommended that scope because I got one and I tried it out. And I had guys put them on 12 gauges. I had them putting them on the 300 Winchester Magnums, 7mm Magnums, 30-30s, and everything. And everybody came back and said, that scope's holding the group well. It wasn't that expensive, but it held the group well, and that was the important thing. 0 to 200, 300 yards, it was fine. It didn't have the optics in it to really go beyond that. But for a hunting gun in lower Alabama where your average shot's 50 yards, it was fine. Yeah, Mike Simmons. I have thought about I've got friends that are big time into air guns, and they hunt rabbits, squirrels, stuff like that. And there's a guy he may have retired now, but he was in North Alabama, and he was building air guns that were 50 caliber that were legal to take deer in the state of Alabama. The state approved you could use them because they went out and demonstrated it was equal, if not greater in power than any muzzleloader. And so he was the stock. It looked like an AR, but the stock was actually like a little scuba tank that screwed in with a high pressure, and you got like 20, 25 shots before that tank would drop below the threshold pressure they couldn't use. But for a while there, it was popping up in local hunting mags and stuff down here back in the early 2000s about that, where guys were taking hogs and deer and stuff like that with air guns. Quiet, did really good. Yeah. Oh yeah, Gray Wolf, dieseling. Liquid fuel to power it, poof, and it goes. I've heard of such things. I have not seen it. I know at one time back in the, I want to say it was in the mid 80s, that I think Spain was investing and looking in that for military application of, of a compressed liquid fuel, um, kind of a caseless ammunition, that the outer case was made up of some sort of polymer that would be completely combusted, would go, and inside was liquid fuel, and that the if I remember correctly, the firing pin would pierce it, and the gun had an air pressure reservoir somehow that upon firing it would gas capture, kind of like we think of modern times of a bullet going up a barrel to capture to work an operating system. Well, it would go into a thing to hold for the next shot. And so you would pull the trigger and it would go bang, fire the bullet, completely consume the case, which was, like I said, something that was designed to provide propellant. Liquid fuel would do all of it, go bang, and then that pressure would be held in the bolt, we shall say, I'm not sure exactly where, for the next round it'd fire again. It worked well in applications, even for fully automatic. What it didn't work well for was longevity, because will it leak off? And if it leaked off and you sit here all night on patrol and you go to pull the trigger, it wouldn't automatically detonate. They had to come up with a secondary way of igniting that first round to get the pressure to start out. And that's what kind of killed it. But I remember seeing a write up in like Future Weapons or something like that, where they were looking at a liquid fuel type idea. I would be concerned how that would cook off in really, really hot guns, or, you really want to be in a burning truck or something like that, or beside a burning truck that was loaded with ammunition like that. I mean, some stuff gonna go bang, but liquid fuel, I think, would be, you know. But hey, when I was a kid, they done promised us by now we'd have laser guns. We'd have flying cars and laser guns by now. So I'm disappointed. Jonathan Frisbee, yeah, the Trowns. I remember that. Remember the auto jet, 1960s auto jet pistol, things like that. Yep. Well, Germany adopted the G11 caseless ammunition that had 300 rounds on board. At the top, center top, was your main magazine, and on either side of it was two additional magazines. So it had 300 rounds on board. And they adopted it just as the Berlin Wall fell and Germany reunited. And suddenly they had all these AKs and all this Soviet equipment, and they were not going to try to retool up with this new state of the art. So they didn't do it. But that G11, that was back in the 80s, caseless ammunition ready to go, and made it practical, and they were going to adopt it. And the Berlin Wall fell, and they didn't do it. I've seen Forgotten Weapons did a episode talking about that and showed that gun. And it was something really innovative and something new that, I would expect by now they'd got around to it. Somebody got back to it because they had got it to that level that a major military of the world was going to adopt it. I figured 30 years later that somebody would have kind of dusted that off and brought it back out by now, but we shall see. Hello there, It Kill. How you doing? Oh yeah, the radiant shields, things like that. Who knows 100 years from now what they'll be using? Could you have told the guys in the Civil War that 100 years from now they'll have flying aircraft, they'll have ships that are not powered by wind, you'll have vehicles that are not pulled by horses, you'll have trains that can run from one side of the country to the other without stopping, ships that'll be able to cross the Atlantic in 4 days, planes that can cross the Atlantic in 3 hours? They would have thought you were mad. But now, thanks to science fiction, we look at it and go, well, I can see that. Warp drive. We'll have warp drive one day, you know. Well, everybody got on a gun craze tonight, didn't they? Oh, yeah. Guns of the South. That was something that it was a book for those that don't remember, a time travel thing of a guy that went back into the Civil War and gave the South, I think it was the AK-47. That's not the gun. If you could do such a thing, the Sten gun. The Sten gun could have been manufactured in those days, and 9mm could be manufactured and would function with black powder. So if you were going to step back through time, that'd be the gun I'd pick, not the AK. Gas systems would be too finicky and too hard to do in those days. Grease gun, another good one. Oh, true, hobo. America loves guns. The arsenal of the world. Hey, 1960 Star Trek predicted personal computers, uh, flip phones. When they first brought out the old, for you old guys, remember when they brought out the floppy disks, the hard floppy disks, not the flat, the plasticky one, but the hard case ones, and they were in colors. That was directly off of Star Trek because those were wooden blocks they plug into a slot and say it was whatever. They copied the colors that were used, and it was the same idea right off of Star Trek. Dancing with Empty. How's my Rogers and Spencer project coming along? So far, so good. I went out, just me shooting. Didn't videotape it. Was practicing with it recently, and it likes the curve bullet very well, better than it did the Johnson and Dow. And so I'm thinking about possibly doing some hunting with it for hog. Me and Bear had thrown it around the idea he's got some hog on his land of getting them to come up to the one of their blinds down there. They got elevated shooting blinds, and that way I could set a camera up and be facing out, etc. And if I could get them to within 20 yards, I'm pretty sure I can place that ball exactly where I want. But we shall see. If you can't find a Ruger or an Old Army, what'd be the next best choice? Well, I tell you, in that power band, you're talking Dragoons. Okay, the Rogers and Spencer, of course. Like I said, I was shocked to find out it's a Dragoon. Uh, but that would be my first choice below the Ruger because it is a solid frame. And it's just easier to work with in that type regard. The Colt design is you go up in power level because you've got a receiver set, cylinder, and a barrel, and they're all just held together by that pin. There's a lot of flexing going on. And so accuracy over distance, especially with those heavy loads that so jolt the gun that the barrel will kind of reseat, because that pin's got to stretch every time it fires because it's steel and it will stretch a couple thousandths and come back. And so the barrel is landing in a different place every time. So the fixed barrel of the Rogers would be superior, and the Ruger would be superior to the Colt because of that. But if you're looking at power level, you've got to go Dragoons because none of the others are going to have that kind of power level. Gray Wolf, I don't think so because of the fact that a Black Hawk has got the floating firing pin. and that firing pin does not protrude far enough to hit a percussion cap. There's a gap there for a reason. And could you retrofit? No, because you got to cut the frame out and turn it into a Ruger Old Army. And all the Ruger Old Army is a Black Hawk frame they cut out for that long nose, that hammer to go in there and hit. You'd be turning one into a Ruger Old Army. Can you turn a Black Hawk into a Ruger Old Army if you got enough time and skill with a milling machine? Yes. You just have to come up with a Ruger Old Army cylinder, drop into it, or make one from scratch. You know, I knew an old Navy guy who had been a master machinist and had spent 28 years in the Navy, most of that on board submarine tenders, which are floating manufacturing ships. I mean, you need it, we make it. And he made a lot of parts for me. Where I had an old 19 Colt model 1910, not a 1911, a 1910. It's what came right before it. Looks very similar, but there were slight differences. And we had a broke hammer, and he made me a hammer from scratch. You know, just took the broke pieces, lined it up, figured it out, and went to 30 minutes. He handed me a hammer, you know, and we just heat treated it and went by that. He could convert one. I mean, he had that kind of skill and would mill out and just make whatever. In fact, I know he made his own 1860 Army out of stainless before anybody was importing them. He just started with blocks of steel and milled it out, and he wanted to borrow one of my 1860s. And I said, for what? He said, I want to use it for a pattern. I gave it to him. And about 6 months later, he came back and held up his all stainless steel, 1860 Army. He even milled off the top of the sight, where the V is, and put an adjustable micro plate in there that you could move around, kind of like the micro rear sight that went onto the top of one of the Smith & Wesson revolvers. He'd actually put a little plate in there and put it where you could adjust the sight up, down, left, right to correct for windage and elevation on the percussion hammer. He was something else. What happened to that gun? I don't know. He's dead now, but I don't know what happened to that gun. Somebody ended up with it. Edgar, yeah, depending on where you're at, it's going to be a hot summer. Now, here in my part of the South, typically when we have these El Niños, what's going to happen is, or El Nino, excuse me, it'll be hot, muggy morning, and around 1 or 2, something like that, it'll cloud up and it'll go to raining, and that'll drop the temperature down. So it'll get up into the 90s, and then it'll cool off into the low 90s or upper 80s. And at night, since it's rained all the way to dark and everything, and the evaporation coming up, that'll cool everything down. And so that night it'll be low 70s. Next day it starts again. And we'll have that kind of raining every afternoon starting sometime early to mid-June and go all the way to the middle of August. Then we get the dog days when it's 110. I'm not going to complain, because on the flip side of that was like we had back in 97, 98, 99, where by this time of the year, I mean, it was 92 degrees in February that year. Christmas was in short sleeves. We'd have a cool day and it was gone. And by mid-March, it was hitting the 90s. By April, we'd hit like 96, 97. It was just like 6 months of right at 100, if not over 100 degree temps. And we had I think it was 60 or 80 days. That's almost 3 months of over 100 degrees every day where I live. They were closing down the military base over here because the asphalt was getting so soft. They couldn't land aircraft on it. The aircraft would sink into the asphalt. That's how hot and nasty it was. So I hope we don't have that kind of summer. It'll kill. What do you know about smokeless powder mods on modern style muzzle loaders? Super, super dangerous. Because smokeless powder is super sensitive to pressure, loading pressures, volumes, and etc. Seating depth, etc. And so a muzzleloader pushing down randomly different pressures every time can cause radically different pressure. And so it may hold it, and then it's a grenade. Um, they've been several modern inline companies tried to come up with a gun that they could just say, oh, could use this powder and avoid using, anything but smokeless. And all of them blow up. All of them. It's just not a sound system. Black powder and the smokeless variations of it, like Pyrodex and etc., which are designed to mimic black powder and the pressure levels. Why would you want to put anything like that into a 40 or a 9mm? You wouldn't. So there's no reason to, if there's a smokeless powder that is capable of being put into a muzzleloader, they'd market it that way. On the other hand, if it's not capable, you would never mention it for fear that somebody would stick it. In Ruger's own literature, they talk about taking the Ruger Old Army and filling the chambers full, like 45 grains of modern smokeless powder, and that was the proof load. It was a triple overload of a 44 Magnum, and the gun held together. And they were dumb enough to put that in print, trying to show how strong the gun was. And then they had people blowing guns up. They thought, well, then I can use smokeless in my Ruger Old Army. Blew guns up. People were going blind, because that cylinder would just grenade and the pieces would come back. And frames would bust and go forward. It's just too sensitive. The O and uh-oh are so close together. There's just no reasonable room for error. And that's the reason of it. I would love, to be able to tell you that you can just do this or that. And I know a lot of people have tried experimenting. And invariably, something bad happens. Invariably. There were guys back in the 80s that thought, if I just sneak in 1 or 2 grains into a 40 grain charge, my velocity goes up by 300 or 400 feet per second. And so, yeah, I'm getting more ballistics out of this muzzleloading rifle. And they're trying to make it do what a 30-06 does. And invariably, something goes wrong. I had a good friend of mine came this close to being blind. He had one of the H&R types. It looks like a shotgun. And had the plugged up back. You breach it and you put the musket cap on it and you load it. Huntsman, I think it was called. And he started sneaking just a little bit in there. And he was hog hunting down here at Coffee Springs one morning, and he pulled the trigger on it. And he had the buttstock, the back third of the receiver, the top of the hammer sheared off and hit him above his right eye. His left forearm was shattered into over 30 pieces where the shrapnel went through his arm and just pulverized it. He nearly bled out from the arm being shattered. And he swore he only put 2 grains into that powder charge. He'd pre-mix them up at home and take them. He swore he only put 2 grains in to a 50 grain charge of black powder. It had worked 100 times, and then he pulled the trigger. I can't recommend it, guys. It's just way, way too risky. Too many variables. Oh yeah, okay. You can, the big powerful guns out in like Africa, Val Forge it of Navy Arms took Elephant with a muzzleloader, a 58 caliber uh, heavy gun. Sometimes you'll find it's called a muzzleloading hunter. It looks like a Zouave, but the barrel's a lot thicker, and it was set up for like 300 to 400 grain charges. It's a shoulder cannon, and he killed a bull elephant. He killed a rhino and a couple of Cape buffalo with that thing. But when you start doing that, there's a reason they had them old 4-bore and 6-bore guns and things like that. They wanted big, huge lead be stopping rifles. And we think in modern times of velocity. So how fast can I get it going to equal the power? And the best way I can explain it is like I did in one of my cabin balls years and years ago, of a motorcycle hitting a brick wall at 110 miles an hour makes this big a hole. An 18-wheeler hitting an identical wall at 40 miles an hour makes the same size hole. This one's got mass. This one's got velocity. Can I make that motorcycle make a bigger hole than the 18-wheeler? Yes, it's got to go a lot faster. So it implies speed and power. So it's got to hit that wall at 160 miles an hour, and it'll make a hole bigger than the 18-wheeler doing 50 miles an hour. You say, but it's mass or velocity. And muzzleloaders and stuff, it was mass is what made them, because they couldn't get that much velocity out of the powder, so it had to be mass to do the job. Yeah, Jeff, if today Ruger would have gone out of business. But I've got, I think it's the 1972 or something like that Lyman manual, and it talks about it, and it's from Ruger's lab, talking about how they proofed that gun, shooting smokeless powder. And it's like, my blood ran cold when I read that. It's like, you're dumb enough to admit this. Yep. TBOR, hello. Correct, Gray Wolf. Big mass impact is what he was going for. A lot of those guys, there was a gun that was put out by Purdey, Purdee, I guess, Purdey shotguns, that was called the, oh, dang it, having a gray moment, give me a minute, the Paradox. That's it, the Purdey Paradox. This gun was set up for India, and so it's a double barrel 12 gauge. At the muzzle on in the side, there is 3 inches of rifling, aggressive rifling at the muzzle. And so it would shoot shot cartridges, and you could use it as a shotgun. It shot slugs out of a regular 12 gauge. And then it had a special bullet that was shaped kind of like a Christmas tree that fit into an all brass tube and was a 75 caliber, turned into a 75 caliber double rifle for shooting things like tiger and stuff like that. And they guaranteed that it would put all slugs and that bullet in a 10-inch circle at 100 yards because when you flipped this little tang sight popped up on the back to use it as a rifle. You folded it down to use it like a shotgun. You popped it up, use it as a rear sight if you're going to use it. So it was a double rifle for shooting big, dangerous game in India. Click, it's for shooting birds and everything else. And it was called the Paradox. And super rare gun today, but it would shoot shot, it would shoot slug, and it would shoot bullets. And it turned itself into a rifle. Yeah, Gray Wolf Paradox. There was a while there you could get a Brownells was selling screw-in rifled chokes for Remington shotguns and Mossberg 500s to try to do kind of like what the Purdy did. So you could put a spin onto smooth slugs, and etc. Yeah. Gray Wolf, have you ever tried one of the Whitworths? One of the Whitworth long range rifles? Those are pretty impressive. You know, they're banned from, well, I mean, it may be a different day, but in my day, they were banned from competition. You could not use a Whitworth and shoot in a muzzleloading competition um, because they were so accurate guns. That hexagonal bullet and that hexagonal bore and everything, and they would hit 600-700 yard targets with them things all the time. They were as accurate as a modern rifle. So they were banned from shooting. I remember Ross Seifred wrote in Rifle Magazine that he had picked one up to give it a try, and he said it was snowing like crazy, and it had just slacked up a little, and he had loaded it up in his garage and stepped out in the snow, and he spotted a rock out there in the snow field, and he decided to shoot it, and he hit the rock. And so he reloaded and shot again. And about the third time he had shot, he looked up and a coyote came walking out of the tree line trying to figure out what the commotion was and walked up to the rock he was shooting. And that's when he realized the real size of the rock, because, you know, it's in a white field. It's a black dot out there. And he realized it was about 300 yards out, and that coyote was looking down at it, and it was the size of a basketball. And he was sitting there with iron sights, casually plinking and hitting a target that small at 300 yards. He's a great shot. But he said, I did not realize how far I was shooting. And so after that, I got serious with that gun. The reason them things were, back in my day, those were $1,000 muzzleloader. Today, there's plenty of $1,000 muzzleloaders. But, you know, Mike Bellevue did us a whole series of shooting the Whitworths and trying to dial it in and find what it liked. I don't know if he ever got it figured out. Ronald, hello to Heidelberg, Mississippi. Correct. Yeah, the tolerances. Whitworth figured out that if you had two lapped surfaces, you did not have a true flat. So when you had three lapped surfaces, you had a true flat to measure and go from. And that's where his idea of what was accuracy. And the British Crown looked at issuing those guns as mass issue because they would be that accurate at such ridiculously long range. I got talking about odd guns. I got lucky one time and had gone down to a gun shop down in Dothan, Alabama, me and a friend. And you're walking along looking, there's all kinds of surplus guns and everything. And it looked like a sporterized British gun, one of the SMLEs or something like that. And it had a, you know, kind of a shorter stock on it, but it wasn't cut. But everything looked like a sporterized gun. And it was in 303. And I picked it up and happened to look at it, and then I spotted something on the barrel. And my buddy was looking at it before me and handed it to me. So I handed it back to him. I didn't say nothing. And so he looked at it a few minutes. He looked down. The bore didn't look worth flip. Bore's really, really dark. And so he put it back down, and we walked around a little bit, and I came back and said, are you going to pick up that infield over? And he said, no, I don't think so. The bore's gone now. I know, but if you don't want it, I'm going to give you, you picked it up first. Do you want it? Well, anytime I said that, you know. So he walked over and he looked at it with a fine tooth comb, and he couldn't figure out what I'd seen. And so finally he gave up and said, yeah, you go ahead and get it. So I paid the guy the $150 for it. And we came out, and like 2 weeks later, we went to the Birmingham gun show, and I came in with it. He said, you shot it, it don't work. So I never fired it, but I know what it is. He said, it's just a sporterized. And I got it where the light would just get right. And I said, read the barrel. What does that say right there? And he read it. And what it was, this was not a military surplus gun that had been cut down. This was where Purdy had bought the actions and made rifles to send to India and Africa in the early 1900s. This was one of those. You know, it's like a Mustang and a Shelby Cobra. This was a Shelby Cobra. It don't matter if it never shoots. It's a historic thing. And so I went into a guy that collects, and I said, you know, and I showed it to him. And the minute he read that on the barrel, you know, his face just washed out, and he went, "Oh my God!" And I went, "Yeah." And we worked out a deal. I made my money back real quick, but I knew what I was looking at. Okay, let's see. Hobo, have you canoed any rivers there in Alabama? A couple of years ago, I canoed the Mississippi and over to Panama City Beach on the ICU. It was epic. I have. I've canoed most of the rivers down here. I have canoed the Choctawhatchee all the way to the Gulf. And if you went to Panama City Beach from Mississippi, past Pensacola, there's a big bay between Fort Walton Beach and Panama City. That's Choctawhatchee Bay. That's where this river dumps out. It's 180 miles by a river down there. I canoed that. I've canoed the Pea River. I've canoed the Conecuh River, Sapulga River, Choctawhatchee, Chattahoochee. Quite a few rivers I've paddled over the years. Blackie, do you have any experience with the M6 takedown rifle? Are they any good? They are decent guns. The modern make is better than the original, I'll tell you that much. And I know Dave Canterbury was a big fan of it for a while, and you saw it in a lot of his videos. I don't know if the House Fire got that or not. Probably did. But the M6 was a decent gun, but now it doesn't do anything a single shot other gun would do. But if you like the look of it, yeah, they're decent. They're fairly accurate. But, you know, you're always going to be outshot with a dedicated bolt action 22. But as far as a gun to put in the truck or something as a takedown or whatever, yeah, they're great for that. Oh, HBO, yeah, going across the mouth of Mobile Bay, yeah, that would be kind of scary. T-Bor, Blackie, I saw an episode of some TV show. A fella in North Carolina makes Kentucky rifles and quenches his barrels by setting the quenching tank to magnetic north. Anybody see this? That's because when it's hot, it isn't magnetized anymore. The magnet won't stick to it. And when he quenches it, it will align with whatever the North Pole was, magnetic north was at the time he quenched it. That's how we can tell in lava flows how the Earth's magnetic field has moved, because the iron inside the lava, when it cooled and became magnetic again, it always lines up. So he's making it point north, which is pretty cool, you know. Yeah, you ain't never canoed it, do it. Sanford, like you need to make a quick ridge line with a bungee. You can do that. You go around the tree with a bungee and hook, but realize bungees stretch, and it's hard to get a tight ridge line if they stretch. And if you stretch them to where they are truly tight, then your bungees don't last too long. That's one of the reasons the military for years taught to carry two bungee cords and just to hook tarps up right quick. You know, throw a poncho up or whatever real quick, and that does work. But it will not be a real tight ridge line because the elastic on the ends are going to give. Good night, It'll Kill. Thanks for dropping in. Oh yeah, T-bore. A lot of the custom guns like that, yeah. Um, I I know of guys that built custom. I built custom rifles and I built my own muzzle loaders a couple times. But I know guys that build custom muzzle loaders and they don't even look at an order until it's around $3,000 because the amount of time and effort they're going to put in and building what you're going to get is a work of art. Super well made, super well balanced, will perform, etc. So you're getting definitely what your money's worth in it, but there's a lot of hours in that hand lapping and precision inletting and stuff like that. And it does not make sense to make a plain Jane gun when you're getting it custom made. Go ahead and get it inlaid, get relief carbon, whatever, because that kind of money, yeah. I built poor boy gun for myself for about $800 from a kit that had the parts, and then I supplemented and reworked them. I just started basic starting point, and to make my gun, my flintlock that Bear put in recent video, because I needed a left-hander. I'm dominant right-handed, but I'm dominant left eye, and so I have to shoot left-handed for precision. And I wanted a left-handed flintlock. I've shot right-handed flintlocks forever and shoot it left-handed, but I actually wanted one that was left, and so I had to build one of those. And I had somebody within a year want to buy it off of me. And how much would you charge us? $2,500. Oh my God! You only had $700 in parts. You don't know how much labor it took to build this rifle. It's not the components; it's the labor to get it there. That's the whole thing. What do you hook the bungee to? You hook the bungee, go around the tree, and hook it back to itself. I've also seen guys that would just take a piece of uh, bank line and make like a jungle knot, go around the tree and hook, and then hook the bungee to it and pull to the other side and hook, or hook from the grommets on the tarp to the tree, hook to the grommet, go around the tree, and hook the bungee back to itself. Again, it's fast, but it doesn't make a very tight ridge line. It will hold up there, but it gives real easy. So. Peter, Blackie, when you're using your haversack to haul water, how long does it take to dry out? Do you ever think of using something inside to help it dry faster? When I have carried water in it, since it is waxed canvas, when I get done, I put my hand in it like you saw, and I shake it, and that'll sling all the surface. It's not going to. It's only surface wet. It's not going to absorb water, except the webbing strap going across. If it's the canvas ones, that would absorb, but the nylon one won't. And so when I do like that, I sling 90% of the water off, turn it inside, and I put it in the sun, and usually it'll be dry in the sun like 10-15 minutes, where I can put my gear back in it. As long as I got a good sunlight, like say 10-15 minutes, it's dry. And I have thought about putting something into it, but I don't carry water that often. But when I do, I realize it's going to dry fairly quickly. Gray Wolf, I saw an interesting observation the other day. On a day-to-day basis, how many things on you or within reach are handmade by a person you know? At one time, it would have been nearly all true. Today, it's very rare to find a handmade item because of mass manufacturing. But that was the idea of the Industrial Revolution. It was good and it was bad. It was good in this guy makes teapots. Let's just say coffee pots. He makes coffee pots. How many coffee pots does he make in a week? 30. Because there's 300 hand operations to produce a coffee pot. And so he makes 30. Well, I'll build a factory and I'll take 300 people and each one does one hand operation that he did, like bend the wire, hammer this, whatever. So they're doing every step he'd do, but it's a person doing it instead of him doing each step. So there's 300 steps, 300 people. So now we're doing 30 teapots, 30 coffee pots an hour. And at the end of the week, I've made 3,000 coffee pots. He's charging $30 a coffee pot because of his labor. I can charge $5 a coffee pot because I can mass produce them. And that's what created, hey, worked great, right? Disadvantage, it put all of the artisans out of the market. And now it's only this model of coffee pot, this model of this, and the variety disappears. And it always comes back full circle, though. After a while, it's the little bitty small guy that's making something different. You go pay him ridiculous amounts of money because it is a different kind of coffee pot and doesn't look like everybody else's. And so it's coming around full circle. I was recently talking to somebody about beer, and they were talking about how, the big companies put all the beer out of business. Yeah, the small brewers that used to be every small town had their own brewer that created the beer or the spirits or whatever, and then you had national chains come in, and that wiped that out. Well, today now you've got microbreweries back in a lot of towns where you can go there and they have seasonal beer and different kinds of beer, and because it's not this kind, this kind, this kind, this kind, you see the over and over again in every shelf. It's a type of beer you've never heard of or tasted, and so this can is $2 at Walmart, and his cans are $6 a piece for the equivalent, but it's a type of beer you've never had. So now the artisans are starting to come back because now it is not the norm, and I hope to live long enough to see a lot of that come back. Plain old Chuck. Hello there, sir. There's a lot of y'all tonight. Multiple Chuck Millers. Yeah. T-board. That's what it is. They come in and they national and they see an opportunity and they come in and they put you out of business because you can't compete with their price because they're mass producing. And they usually, when they first come in, it's a fairly high quality, fairly well made, X, whatever we're talking about. But then as the years go by and that profit, can we, drop the quality just a little bit, make a little bit more profit? And the quality slowly starts going down. And then after X number of years, when that artisan makes his thing, it's light years better than this piece of garbage. But man, it costs 10 times as much. Yeah, but it's light years better than this piece of garbage. And everybody's got this piece of garbage. And that artisan starts making his money again. And it goes full circle. Here we go again, With COVID, it showed a lot of people you could work from home. Or before, no, you have to come into the office. Now they know you can work at home. Well, if I can work from home, I can run a garden, right? And that means I can grow at least some of my own food, and I can a little bit of this, that. So I can go to the grocery store and buy in bulk and then come home and can it and put it up and spread cost out over the year. And you're starting to see that with the off-gridders and the preppers and stuff like that. They're rediscovering what their grandparents did back at the height of the industrial age. And so I'm hoping that 100 years from now, you're going to have yards that everybody's got a garden in the yard. I was seeing a thing the other day where some big name architects school that they design apartment buildings and everything in the big cities, and they're now saying that kitchens are obsolete and that new living accommodations shouldn't have a kitchen in it. That people don't cook anymore, so you just need a counter with a little bitty sink and a microwave and a fridge. That's it. You don't need a dining room table. You don't need any of that stuff because you're going to watch in front of the TV. And so they want to eliminate that space and do something else. I don't think they're going to sell many places in the South, but maybe in New York or California, but I don't think they're going to sell a lot down here like that. Yeah, Chuck Miller, that's the thing. It's greed. And you can halfway understand it when they tell you that, yes, sir, you can go build a factory in Dayton, Ohio. You can work really, really hard. You can have your product produced out of your factory. You work like a dog, and in 20 years, you'll be a millionaire. Or you can outsource it to China and you make $5 million in the next 2 years. Which would you like to do? And so they did it. But that's starting to go away too. China is not the place. Stuff's coming out of China as far as businesses and everything, and they're moving. Now it's actually cheaper to build a factory in the South and build it here than it is to build it in China and ship it to the U.S. We've got a couple of Chinese factories built in Alabama in the last couple of years because it was cheaper to build the factory here and employ rednecks than it was to ship it from China, which I thought was funny. And they pay really good wages. So, hey, again, it'll go in a circle sooner or later. Adam E. Blackie, good evening. Have you ever fired the Howdah 20 gauge pistol? I have not. I have fired something similar to it that was a Terry's Texas Ranger, which was a short double barrel, same length barrel, but it had a short stock on it. And it was a Confederate cavalry unit. And they were famous for these short little barrel guns. And for a while, Navy Arms made those percussion double barrel 20 gauges. And the Howdah, to me, looks like the same basic thing, except it's a pistol instead of having that short stock on it. But I fired it, and it was a handful, boy. You don't have to ask, did it go bang when you pull that trigger? Well, we got about 20 minutes left, so anybody got any questions, throw it out there. Like I said, hopefully I'm going to get to go. Thus far, my New Year's resolution for 2023 was I wanted to camp every month of this year, at least once. So in January, me and William Collins and Pink and Homer Mayo went to Mississippi and camped out over at that state park. February, I went with the Southeast Bushcraft Base Camp guys to Duggar Mountain, and we camped up there where the low that night was 6 because it was 26 and we're 2,000 feet higher. So it's 26 down there in the valley, and you lose 10 degrees for every 1,000 foot elevation. So we're 2,000 feet higher. So we figure about 6 up there. I did that, and that's where the hot tent was. March, we had my gathering. April, I went and camped out with Mr. Dakota. And so I want to camp out this month. And then next month, I'm going to Ohio to camp out at Pathfinder. Me and Miss Trinity and Mr. Mike Simmons are going to be up there as vendors for Trinity. I should have a handful, not many, but just a handful of my haversacks to sell. And Trinity will have her bags. And so that'll be for June. I have not figured out about July yet, but God, it gets so hot by that point. I mean, I want to just wait and go out right at dark, set up camp, spend the night, and come back in the morning for lunch because the heat gets me. And my heart condition, it's not good for me to be sitting there too hot. And so that the doctor really gets upset if I get really, really cold, if I get really, really hot. So I'm trying to take care of him because he's the one that turns all kinds of colors. I was having fun, but my heart rate got way up because I was way too hot. So I got to kind of do that. So that's July is still in question. August still in question. September, I think there's some place I'm supposed to go. Not sure yet, but someplace in September. I think there's someplace. And then October, it's an unofficial. We're not doing a gathering, but Miss Pam and a couple other people are coming down to camp out at Geneva. So we're going to camp. That's the first weekend of October. November, I will probably go over on Bears Land. Me and him will probably, because that's beginning of hunting season, me and him will probably do a muzzleloader camp one night on the weekend or something. And then Christmas, not sure yet, but I'll probably try to go to the mountains or something then. But that's tentatively my plan for camping this year. Oh, Chuck, that's what I was talking about. The later in the year will be first weekend of October at same place, Geneva State. I'm not going to call it a gathering. It's just if people want to show up, we'll do it. But I'm planning on going and camping for several days. And as I understand now, Pink's coming and a bunch of others. So Justin was going to try to be there too. So it's probably going to be 8 to 10, 20 people show up for at least that. Okay, Adam, why can I not have a loading gate on a Ruger Old Army? You can if you made a plate like the conversion cylinders had, because the Ruger single action modern has the gate. The conversion cylinders that are two-piece don't need the gate because you got to take the cylinder out to pull it apart to fire it. If you had something that's a bored through cylinder like a modern, they had the base plate that screwed into the back of the thing and had a loading gate that opened and closed. I've even seen some conversions of Remingtons that the gate went up instead of down. A lot of these were converted by gunsmiths in the field, and so they just made it where it came down and it hooked onto one of the screws that came from the through the action. They just put a long screw in like a turn screw, so you turn it and it hooked the gate closed, and you turn it and unlock it and you flip the gate up out of the way to load. But hey, but it can be done. You can put a loading gate if you're going to have cartridges in there. You just got to mill it out, because for a while there, I know they made it for the Rugers and for the Colts, where you would have this conversion that went in and screwed and anchored to the back plate, and it had a loading gate, and then you had to just route out the frame to make the channel big enough to load cartridges up into it. So it can be done, but it's work. Hobo, what river in Alabama has the best catfish? Favorite national forest, best area for hog hunting? I like Choctawhatchee River further down, especially below Geneva for catfish. You got the Pea River and Choctawhatchee River come together at the junction in Geneva. From there south, it's Choctawhatchee. When it crosses into Florida, it's Choctawhatchee all the way to the Gulf and is a state park. And they have good catfish down there. It's big, wide, slow, exactly what catfish want, with plenty of food and plenty of stuff washing into the river to feed them. So that would be a good place to look for it. Favorite national forest? I like Conecuh National Forest or Geneva State Forest. Both those are big, vast. That's the largest state and the largest federal in the state of Alabama, and plenty of acres. I think it's like 70,000 acres for Conecuh and 7,000 for Geneva State. So, and best area for hog hunting. We have a lot of hog down here, and so when we had my event, me and Mike Simmons and JJ loaded up in his Jeep and went up the hill toward the ranger area and went back in the woods there, and there was like 40 pigs. Literally, they were this size piglets, probably 25 or 30 of them, and there were 10 or 12 big adults in the 200 to 300 pound range. running around up there. I don't mean just disappeared. I mean, we had to sit there and wait for them to get done crossing the road. There were so many of them. So there's a lot of hog in there. And if you'll contact the ranger which is Mr. Driggers at Geneva State, tell him I'm looking for a place to hunt hog. I'm sure they'll put, because hogs are so destructive. And so they'll point you in areas to where go look for hog down there. Dances with Empty, an online, yes. They have an online safety thing you take, but you can take it online. And an out of state, there's an out of state year which was expensive, real expensive. And then there was like a 7 day that was like 75 or $80. And I think what most people do is that. And you can say when it's going to start and stop. So I can purchase it and say that I'm going to come in on Friday night and it's going to start Saturday morning at 5 a.m. and run for a week, so that I can get on site or whatever. But if you go to outdooralabama.com, there's plenty of information there. And if you request, I believe from there, they will mail you one of the game magazines that they put out. They only publish them once a year, and it's usually in the end of August. They pop up, and it will be all the rules and regulations for the year. And so that's the time to get it. And I know they have combined licenses now where you can get like a saltwater, a freshwater, a this hunting, a that hunting. You pay a $15 and you can hunt over corn, so there's all kinds of varieties in there. And you should be able to do what find what you want to do to come hunt. And Dances with Empties, if you want to find hog down here, go anywhere where farmers hang out and put you up a little bitty card saying, if you've got problem hogs, call me, I'll come get them. You'll get phone calls. They're all over the place down here. And the famous Hogzilla, which was 1,000-pound plus, was down here in my neck of the woods. And where my gathering is in Geneva State Forest, just outside the forest, like 5 to 8 miles from where we were holding my camp out 2 years ago, the guy went out to feed his dog at 8 o'clock that night, and there was an 880-pound boar standing in the backyard eating his dog's food. So he just went in the house, picked up a 38, walked out, bam, a 357, shot him in the head, and made the paper about he got 800 and something pounds of pork for one thing of Alpo. I mean, they're everywhere down here. Caesar, I'm sorry, what's happening is that's YouTube. What they're doing is, I've got 80,000 followers. I post a video. They send it out to 10%, which is 8,000. They randomly pick the 8,000. And then, even though you're subscribed, only that 8,000 will get it. Based on how they respond is they'll move it to 50% of my people. And based on how they respond is how they'll give it the whole thing before they kick it up and make it go viral. And so if I've kind of when you're looking at YouTube on a computer and you look up at the top and you got that list of everything you've been looking at up there, if I'm way down here in the bottom end of subscription, I kind of drop off. Now I've got to break 100,000 views before they'll hand it to you. So yeah, it's YouTube playing their games. Paul, yeah, that was pretty cool. When I was doing my toggle thing, I had never heard of Felix. It was after I posted my video that somebody went and said, hey, and pointed out Felix's video. And it wasn't that I'd invented it or Felix invented it. We just kind of stumbled on it along about the same time. His has been out a couple of months before mine came out. but I hadn't heard of the man until then. But so many people in the comments said, you're doing what Felix had done. So I went and saw his stuff, and I commented. He's a nice guy, you know. We just kind of both stumbled on it. And then Dave, like you said in that video, he was going through looking, and he found my video on the rapid deployment ridgeline and that little innovation. And now he's gone and refined another one that came out like a following, where I talked about putting toggle on and using it for the guy lines to cinch it down. So, yeah, you know, all we're doing is sharing. I didn't invent anything. I learned it either here, there, or way back. You know, like I said, my grandfather on my mother's side only had one arm. And so I remember him putting toggles on the lines to hook things, hook boats and stuff like that, because he only had one hand. And so he'd use it like a button in a loop. He could get it and hook it over it and lock it and unhook it one-handed. And so he couldn't tie a knot easily one-handed. And I remember seeing Granddaddy use toggles on a lot of stuff because of that. I remember a lot of his coats had toggles instead of zippers, because he couldn't put a zipper together one-handed easily, but he could button. And so he used toggles and stuff. But it was pretty cool, Dave giving me credit on that. I was really tickled about that. And I've learned a lot from Dave over the years, you know. So great shout out. Very proud to be helping. Well, guys, it's about time. Thank y'all very much for all the comments and everything. Really appreciate it. And I hope to be on next Thursday night, same bat time, same bat channel. Thank y'all so much for the support and the views. And thank you very much for those who bought my haversacks and stuff and send me feedback on it, telling me how much you like it and whatever. I really appreciate it. Thank y'all so much. Till next time, guys, I'm wishing you safe journeys. Have a great day, guys.